Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents with me, your host Valerie, and sometime kitty co-hosts Miss Purrington and Mookie. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. In addition to podcasts, Comedy Wham brings you articles, album reviews, our advice column, all of my Austin Chronicle articles about the Austin comedy scene. And check out our listing of festivals from across the country and the world. And our FPIA contest page is live tracking the 2024 contest at Cap City Comedy Club. Our most popular feature is our events page for live comedy shows in Austin, Houston, and DFW, where 100% of the entries you see come from comics and producers. Click the Submit a Show from the top of the homepage or events page to fill out the survey to get your show listed. It's free and easy. Tag us on your Instagram stories and we'll share your show promo to our Instagram followers. We also offer paid promo boosts on our Instagram page, account, whatever, social media. Want to support these resources that we provide? You can donate to Comedy Wham on PayPal, Venmo, or even Patreon. Click the Support CW icon on our homepage to see the ways that you can help us. Our podcast was launched in 2016 to bring you funny people and their stories. As a fan, I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations and will usually take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin comedy scene one of the best in the country. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us. Today, we are talking to the Latino Comedy Project's artistic director. Founded in 1998, the Latino Comedy Project, LCP, is an Emmy-nominated sketch troupe known for its political satire and pop culture parody and full-length award-winning stage shows. Online, the group has a loyal following of longtime fans on its YouTube channel and on social media for its pop culture satire and videos. Like how I copied that straight from their YouTube page? All right, their most recent sketch show, Gentrifucked, received a Best of recognition by the Austin Chronicle, and March 7th, 2024 was named Latino Comedy Project Day by the City of Austin to celebrate the LCP's 25-year contribution to Austin culture. I first heard about the LCP when my hometown hero, Vanessa Gonzalez, mentioned in her very first interview with me that she joined LCP when she first moved to Austin. Pretty damn cool to see how far she's come. And in addition to being LCP's artistic director, our guest is a writer, director, and filmmaker. And now, Comedy Wham presents our guest, Adrian Villegas.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It's great to meet you finally.
Yeah. We small world that Omar Gallaga has asked me for some insights into the Austin comedy scene. Wrote an article about the scene, and then he wrote after me that he said, "Hey, I don't know if you've met Adrian before, but I think you two should connect."
And he was right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was telling you earlier, it's interesting because I was going to reach out to you. You were like on a short list of people that I needed to reach out to about this. And that was a great article too. You made a great contribution to that article.
Yeah, I was blown away by how much he included.
Did it make you realize what an encyclopedic resource you are, though? Did it make you realize that?
Yeah, I'm starting to accept that more and more. I have a really weird brain because my background is as a mathematician, so I just store weird facts all the time, and everything is all about connections and weird things, like being able to remember that Vanessa had her start in Austin with the LCP, and just random little things like that.
I remember that interview too because I'm so stoked for Vanessa all the time, like really, and nothing that's happened has been a surprise to any of us who knew her back then. But the story she told you was funny, and it was true, like about her audition, because I remember at the time we weren't auditioning, and we would usually do that in waves, right? So she reached out to us directly about auditioning, and I was like, you don't want to, there's a thing about the group psychology, right? And you kind of want to preserve a good vibe if you can. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't want to have somebody come in and depress everybody, because it happens. Sure. And then everybody's like, oh, we got to tell them no. So I wanted to meet with her one-on-one first. And if she was good, then I, have the whole group check her out. Yeah. But I said, please put some effort into this, because people come in and they think because they're an amusing person at parties. I mean, we had to deal with that in the early years of the group a lot. Like people thinking I'm my friends tell me I'm funny, and eventually we had to get more stringent about what we ask people to do in the auditions. Like, you need to audition with something you wrote. which is even beyond what people audition for plays. They can come in and do monologues from other plays and stuff. But it's like, you're going to be contributing to the material we're creating. So we need to know that you have a sensibility, that you have a voice, and that we want to know what you think is funny and how you. So I told her that. I said, please be good. and I don't know how she took that, but she did it. I mean, and it was so funny because I found out later she just put something together like specifically for that audition.
Oh my gosh.
But she had a secret weapon, which was her mom.
Oh,
so,
of course, yes.
The monologue was based on her mom.
Of course.
Like 100%. I think she even wore some clothes that were her mom's for the audition. And it was a dating app interview, back then when they used to do interviews on camera for their dating service or whatever. So it was her talking about what she was looking for in a man, but then it ended up going off on these detours about insulting. That's always a favorite topic in general, the bitches at work. That's a subgenre, right? So it was like her mom going off insulting in these great, colorful ways the women that she worked with and how they're in her business and they need to fucking mind their business. And, I always remember the joke where she talks about there was one woman who was telling her something and that she calls Dairy Queen because she doesn't have a neck. She looks like a double dip cone from the neck up. Yeah. So right away she did this and I was like, I told her after she did that piece, I was like, because we were in the middle of doing a show, I said, I wish we could put this on stage right now.
Wow.
So I got the rest of the group to check her out. I told them she was great. And I mean, it was no sell at all. She was, and so it was really cool. I mean, I'm one of those people that I've observed and I've been part of situations where people get insecure and threatened when they meet people that are really talented. And I get the opposite. I'm like excited, like where can we put you? How can we let people see you? What do you want to learn? And that was the great thing about people like Vanessa coming into the group is that they have this great talent to start with, but then they start learning how to structure things and how things fit together and the process of like A to B to Z, right? Because there's no cheating that process if you want to get a result, right?
Yep.
And I think that served her really well because she went into improv and stuff too. But I think that process of like having an idea, going through the group writing process in the writing room and hearing other people's input and making adjustments and seeing how it fits with other people's pieces and that whole like refinement. I think she carried that over in a lot of useful ways when she started doing her solo shows, which was amazing because she did like 3 solo shows in a year or two. I mean, like,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, but like I said, we're always so happy every time we see what's going on with Vanessa, and we all still see her whenever we get a chance. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is. Although it would be fun to talk about Vanessa for the rest of our time together, this is the Adrian Villegas episode. So
I was trying to change the subject. No, I'm joking.
Let me kick off with my usual icebreaker question, which is one word to describe your past.
Boring.
Really? Really?
Well, I'm a workhorse person. I'm not a crazy partying.
Yeah.
I've never been that. It's always been about. I get a lot of excitement out of doing the work. But there's that saying where they say, live a bourgeois life, but have an exciting mind. That's kind of how I live,
Okay.
But it's no, I mean, look, it's an interesting background if you want to look at culturally. I mean, I grew up in Waco, Texas.
Okay.
And whatever, all that entails. And I had to
I grew up in Burleson, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So.
What was that like?
In my little high school, junior high as well, I think I was one of 2 Hispanic kids. I think our graduating class was maybe 200-300, and in the entire high school, there was certainly only 2 Hispanics, 3 tops.
Wow.
So now I assimilated because I'm pale as hell, and I could,
Was that a conscious thing that you did? Assimilating?
Yes.
You felt the pressure to need to do that?
Very much so.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I grew up in for a while, like a fundamentalist Christian environment, evangelical church environment. Pretty diverse neighborhood that I grew up in, which kind of neighborhood that I don't know if they even exist anymore. You had your black kid on the corner, you had your Mexican immigrant family next door, you had your kind of white, trashy friends up the street, and everybody was working class. And I look back on that and realize what a kind of a gift that was, because that kind of, just being in that environment, you don't realize it, but it shapes your perceptions of everything going forward, right? Because you just go, here we all are, and there's no separation in your mind. But I had to get the hell out of Waco. I knew when I was young that I was not going to be able to stay. And I'm the only person who did leave Waco out of my family. They're all still there. But it did shape me in seeing the, in the church, seeing kind of the grift that it was, even at 11 years old, and seeing the cruelty that was possible, born out of religious faith and because of the moral superiority that people feel and all that stuff. I saw all that as a kid, and it did shape me. It shaped me by being more skeptical. It shaped me into knowing what I don't want to be part of and what I don't want to reflect in the world, you know. And then culturally, very Mexican upbringing, Mexican American. I think my mom was third generation. Our great grandmother came over from Mexico, but and that was always there too. That's fish don't know they're in water till later, right? So and I ended up using a lot of that upbringing in all the work I started doing in my 20s and stuff when I started trying to do what became the Latino Comedy Project. So it was influential, but me personally, I don't, I'm not a very flamboyant person in my life. Like I said, I was such a nerd as a kid that I never needed to start partying. That was always my drug, being locked in a room, writing or whatever. Yeah. So, and if I'd had some void to fill at that young age, probably would have gone that path with everybody else.
Yeah. Was writing something that you feel like you've been doing most of your life?
Yeah. And drawing. I drew a lot when I was young too. I still do, but not as much as the writing. Yeah. And writing is a very joyful. The perfecting of stuff is the joyful part, the honing and the crafting and the rewriting and and then a great new idea springs up while you're trying to make the thing that you have in front of you work, and then something blossoms out of that. Yeah.
Like sculpting.
Yeah, the sculpting and the seeing. When you get into that process, then you're all day you're thinking about, that could change to that and this and that and this and that. But that's also a state of mind that you try to condition yourself to have all the time, whether it's a state of mind of plucking ideas out of the air or seeing something that you could use, or when you're really in the process. Well, that's when you're accumulating material, but when you're in the process of writing, it's compulsive. You're obsessed with what you're working on. Yeah. But that's the fun part for me. I still get a lot of joy from that.
Your IMDb credits are writer, director, and what was the third thing? Filmmaker. So
I have IMDb credits?
Or I thought I found something.
Was that for that MTV Today thing, or?
Probably.
Yeah.
So performance, ignore the factual errors, okay, in what I say. So the performing is something that came when?
I always tell people that was out of necessity. Oh. Yeah, it was out of necessity because in the mid '90s, I was basically just kind of, the classic hero's tale where it's they were in the desert for 40 days. Well, there was a period where I was in the desert, basically just self-exile of just I just had jobs that allowed me to write all the time because I was I want to write. I kind of wanted to do material that was the brown version of what the stuff Richard Pryor and Woody Allen would do, and I didn't know how to do that. I knew how to write, but it was in very kind of traditional forms. I wanted to write stuff into using the cultural background that I had. So I was kind of just accumulating screenplays, sketches, monologues, and I had you could ask Omar, binders of stuff, handwritten at that time, very neatly, very neat. My handwriting was very neat. My printing was very neat. But and then after about 2 or 3 years of that, I had an opportunity to get involved with the local show, and these guys were starved for material.
Were you in Austin at the time?
I was in Austin at the time, yeah. In '96, and I helped these guys out at the Santa Cruz Center for Culture put on a Dia de los Muertos show. And I'd approached them when they were planning to do it and said, hey, I got a lot of material. And the guy's eyes just lit up. And I thought, oh, they must be really hard up. Because he got so happy. And they used a lot of it. I did a couple of monologues. I wrote an ensemble piece called the Chicano Dating Game, which was that used everybody that we had in the group. And all those pieces went over really well, and which was really like revelatory for me, because I've been lucky enough to be around when other people have this moment where they go, hey, I'm not bad at this, or oh, what I thought would work actually works, you know? And that was that moment for me where all the things, the punchlines and the things that I thought were funny, they landed. And then you just go, and then you get this huge, like, you know, kind of feeling very superpowered at that point, you know, like I have this capability, right? So the performing part, though, came actually after that in a way, because I through these other circumstances, I kind of didn't have a lot of options here in Austin. I wasn't really connected to any theater companies. There wasn't really any place that would do anything like I did. I didn't have access to, like I would later, like an ensemble, like in the Latino Comedy Project, which is a whole other story. So I thought, you know, I'm not going to let anybody like stop me from doing this kind of work. It was really about the material, the kind of material I wanted out there. So I decided just to do a one-man show.
Where did you do this?
At UT. I had some friends at the Mexican American. They were in the Mexican American Culture Committee at UT, and I'd known them for a while. And I made a pitch to them like, I got all this material. I think I can do a one-man show, which was insane. Insane. Yeah. And the only thing that really gave me the confidence was that I'd done these monologues and this other thing. They'd gone over well. And also just kind of like thinking, if I could just model this after like Richard Pryor's best stuff, that was all I had to go on, and the writing. So from a performance standpoint, I wasn't that experienced yet. But they agreed, and they promoted it. And I wrote a show called Six Mexicans Named Gonzalez, and in the spring of that 97, I did it for the first time, and it scared the shit out of me because they promoted it so well. It was free for the audience, and like 300 people showed up in this auditorium, and they don't know me. I designed the poster for it, and the title was interesting, and I think it was just that thing where it's like there wasn't anything being done like that, so people flocked to it, and it was free, sponsored by that committee. So I was terrified because I prepared so much, so blindly preparing, because I didn't have a process yet, so I just overcompensated, and that's what saved my ass. But when the people showed up and I saw how many people were there, I was like, what the fuck have I done? I described it to a friend of mine, and I said, it was like that moment when you get on a roller coaster and it's going up the hill and it's clicking up, and you're like, you can't get off now. You just got to ride it. And but so the answer to the question, it was out of necessity because I had no other resources but myself. So I was like, well, I got to be the vehicle for this material, what I have to say or what I think should be said or the observations. And that show specifically dealt a lot. It had a lot of different themes, but the main theme was just dealing with our representation in pop culture history. And there was some family stuff in there. There was a monologue based on my brother, monologue based on my grandpa and stuff that he dealt with during World War II. Stories that I thought needed to be told. Like he was a vet. He was a wounded vet from Battle of the Bulge, and he came back to Waco and a place where refused to cut his hair. After, you know, and then he went home and put on his uniform and went back to the barbershop, and they're like, oh fuck, you know, and then he cut his hair. But like, so I used it as a vehicle for that. It was commenting on Speedy Gonzalez was the last monologue in the show, the character Speedy Gonzalez, and I played him like he was this Latin lover type in real life, and that was just the character he played. But it was commenting on just like the struggles of how Hollywood a lot of times kind of cast non-Latinos in Latino roles, and how he said they wanted to cast some Italian hamster named Spinny Spumati as a Mexican. So, you know, it was just this fun way of dealing with all these different things in history. But I was the only tool in hand, really. Well, that doesn't sound right. But but I was the only tool I had at the time. And that opened a lot of doors because people saw. But another interesting thing about that is I look back and look at my own evolution as a performer. You get better as you do it. You learn more. You learn more techniques and more practices that are going to make you better on stage. I tell people this all the time. me as a performer was not up to me as a writer at that point. I could get the laughs.
Yeah.
Because they were well written, right? Like it was structured and I knew timing, but the performing part, like bringing the humanity and the subtext and the emotional inner life, it took me a few years to like really get into that, because then I'm like, because then every show was enjoyable. When I started, it was like, I need to get this laugh. And then I'm like, no, this is written well enough that you can just be the character. You can find the inner life, and then you could play that, and the laughs will happen anyway. So, I mean, it's all been an evolution, but I had no other resources to draw on at that time. So it was out of total necessity.
So when did the Latino Comedy Project start to take form for you, or was there something in between?
Pretty quickly.
300
I mean, like,
eyes on you, plus the support of the Mexican American Cultural Committee. That's huge.
Yeah, well, 97 is when I did Six Mexican named Gonzalez, and I did a couple of, after I did it at UT, I did my own runs of it a couple of times here in Austin. And Maria Rocha, who was with the Acto Humanidad Cansada at the time, who's still a friend and a mentor, she reached out to me. She had an idea to start the Latino Comedy Project, and she was inspired by the possibilities she saw in other places. And she was like, when Austin needs something like that. So she asked me, and I didn't really know her that well. She just had come to some of the performances, the solo performances. And she asked me mainly because she knew I was a prolific writer. And she was very wise in that, knowing that a project like that, a Latino comedy sketch group, would not succeed if you didn't have material. Like if you didn't have somebody, or at least a couple of people that could generate material. And she was absolutely right. And so I joined and became part of that, was part of the leadership of that group in 98. We had our first show in early 98. And that made an impact from the start, from the very first. I mean, even before we did our first show.
How did it feel going from I've tackled this one person performance to now it's a collaboration effort? Because writing is such a singular activity.
Yeah, and I luckily I'd had a really great experience doing that show in '96, that Dia de los Muertos show, and I wrote the Chicano dating game, where it was like having a new toy, because I never had the opportunity to write original comedy for a group, and that sketch had 5 characters in it, and it was a game show, the typical game show setup. Sure. But it was it was written in a way that everybody scored. Like you gave everybody their spotlight moment, and then people bounced off each other. So I kind of had gotten a sense of how cool that could be, to create pieces for a group, and that utilized everybody well. So I had that already in my experience, but it was a different process. I mean, like again, it's one of those same things with like you learn as you go, and you don't know what the hell you're doing sometimes at the beginning, and I probably was way too results oriented at the beginning. Now I think I'm a lot more patient and understanding director than I was then, but we were all just so young and just learning, and then there was like personality differences and just things that, it's like anything where you're learning how to work as a group. And you don't know what the right way is when you start, because how can you? And you try to learn as you go and apply those lessons as you go. But the chemistry was amazing. Despite whatever dysfunction there may have been in the process, which there was, the chemistry on stage was amazing from the start. And we just had LCP 25 in March at the Hyde Park, and we had a lot of people that were there at the very beginning, back. And we had so much fun. I mean, it was all there. It was all there still, and did material from 20 years ago that still killed.
Wow.
Yeah, and that stunned me. Like, I'm thinking we're trying to set this up where people understand this is older material, but I think the material was selected well enough that it held up for people. But it was just a lot of lessons, It was a fun, for me as a writer, it was a fun experience to have that kind of sandbox to play in all of a sudden. Like you had people who are all funny. They're gonna kill with whatever you give them. If you And one of the lessons of life is you don't fully appreciate those moments when you're in them. I think that's something everybody can identify with, right? You're like, you know, and I learned later to like be in the moment and look and go. And I've told all these people since then, like when we've gotten back together, like in 2016, we got back together to do Gentrifucked. The original members, I made sure to let them know, like, I'm honored to be with you guys. Like, I feel lucky that I'm letting you know what I should have told y'all guys, what we all should have told each other 20 years ago, which is how lucky we are to even be working together and being able to do this and do it well and have this much fun doing it. But it was interesting because even before we did our first official show, February 1998, that January we previewed a couple of sketches. We were asked to open up for a group that came out of California at a UT performance, and they had like a couple local sketch groups, new groups that opened up, and we went and did 2 sketches. We did a sketch called Cash for Kilos that Michael Trejo wrote, who's a prominent actor in town. He won the Best Actor in Austin a few years ago.
Wow,
yeah.
nice.
Michael was there from the beginning and has been really pivotal in everything too. And then I wrote a sketch called the self-defense, Pendejo self-defense kit for women. Yeah, you're laughing. It's what you expect it to be. And it's basically just, you know, it's a commercial for a product, but the product has all these different solutions to deal with each kind of pendejo you encounter. There's like 4 or 5 different pendejos. And, you know, you got your you know, the slob loser that thinks he's on your level, that he can hit on you. You know, he's like hiding the Pampers that he's buying in the grocery store. and then the pretty boy who tells you whatever you want to hear. And he's obviously, and then the macho mojado who just, oh, babacita, you know, that guy that every woman has dealt with.
Yep.
And then the abusive guy. He's like the topper, right? And the solution for him is just a gun. And then a second gun to put in his hand to make it look like self-defense. Oh. But we did that sketch at this little, you know, 2 sketch mini performance, and and this was a month before we did the actual show. And the audience reaction, the women especially in the audience for that sketch, and I think it stunned all of us because there's a certain response you get when you just say the truth sometimes, you know. And I remember all of us, after we were done and we heard that reaction, during and after we were done, and we were all in the side just huddled like, are you joking? You know, like that. I remember distinctly. I remember looking at Patty. We're all like, oh my God, what happened? So like, that was really one of those moments where you go like, okay, yeah, we're doing this right as best as we can at this moment anyway, and it's working. And then the full show, you know, same thing. People loved it. People kept coming. We did 3 shows in the first year, which is fucking crazy.
Wow.
I look back at that like, how the hell did we do that?
That's a lot.
The answer is sloppiness. Well, because that's the other thing. Your stagecraft gets better over time. Your discipline gets better. Everybody gets more on the same page. But the stuff was funny. I mean, I'm sure we were very sloppy compared to now, but the material was funny and the performances were funny. And then within time, we started touring too. And so it was all just this huge journey that we all, especially getting back together for the 25th anniversary thing and sharing the story. Like that retrospective was structured to walk people through these like tentpole moments in the group's history. And they found that fascinating. And we all had all these anecdotes and stuff. So we've all reflected on that whole experience recently, and I think everybody holds it in like they hold it precious to themselves, you know. That's also a part of life. We were talking before we started recording about just how life is, and you know, you just have to accept the fact that sometimes you try to learn not to do this as you go, but like you don't always value where you're at the moment and what it is worth, you know. We enjoyed it, you know, but I think I definitely hold it in more value now than I ever have, you know.
Yeah. So being named the Latino Comedy Project and the rapid evolution that Austin has gone through in the 25 years that the project has been around, how do you view the importance of the Latino component then versus now?
Well, that's funny you mentioned that because we talked about that during the retrospective too. Like I mentioned the fact that there's a couple things. I mentioned the fact to the audience that, believe it or not, the reason we ended up calling ourselves a Latino Comedy Project was because it was the most uncontroversial choice on the page at the time.
Interesting.
And now, it's changed twice, Now it can be controversial because you are calling yourself Latino Comedy Project.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's all government made up fucking terms anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like that's imposed on us. So it's all, but that just underscores what you're saying about things have changed. And one of them is that I look at I'll put it this way to you to help you understand how I look at it. So we came back to do a reunion show. Through Michael Trejo had reached out to some of the people that ran the Out of Bounds sketch because he saw some older troops doing reunion shows, and he thought, maybe the LCP could do that. And he talked to them and asked them would they be open to that, and they said, yeah, that'd be great because we know those guys going back a long way. And then he came to the rest of us and pitched it, and everybody was down. And then it became about like, what do we do? And then we all decided to do something brand new rather than a greatest hit show. And then we did it for the Out of Bounds Festival, one show only, Gentrifuck, and then we produced it ourselves the next year, 2017. And I started seeing from that run, it reminded me, because we hadn't done anything in like 5 or 6 years, I was like, the reaction we got, I was like, fuck, man, this is a public service. Like this is a duty. So I decided then, and we weren't never really going to keep it going. That was never the idea. It was more like a gunslinger thing, like to show that we could still do it and then just walk away. But I was like, these people need it. And then that was also 2017. We had Trump just became president. And I'm like, this is a psychological service to have this where you have material, you have shows where people can culturally connect. They can feel the group union, that you have, the communal experience, that comedy, live comedy has. And also with the material, remind them that they're not crazy. Because we're still being gaslit all the time, So I saw that service as, I saw it as a public service and that it needed to continue. That's why we're still doing it right now. And then when you put that in the context of how much Austin has changed and how much Austin has strangled out our communities. And I feel like it's just, it's an island, that we're having to preserve, So and that's another thing, I look back at some material we did in the early years because I went through binders of show binders when we were doing LCP 25. And I mean, there were sketches we did where we were referencing, Michael Trejo did this character where it was like Eye on Traffic, but instead of being in a helicopter, it was just some vato on the top of the Taco Bell, like on the roof, just kind of looking at what was on Riverside. And the joke with his character was that at the end of every report, somehow he always ended up dead. And they would do a eulogy for him. It's like that was the running joke with him, And then music, Candle in the Wind would come on or whatever. But I read that script from like the first year, and it's like, talking about East Riverside and like how, like the way he's describing it, it's like the hangout for Latinos, because he goes like the Tejanos, he goes, beware of a large weaving mass of hot pink and aqua. Talking about the shirts, that the Tejano guys wear. Yeah. but like, and you read that and you go like, that's not true now. Yeah. It's all gentrified right now. It's all pristine and plastic and so you get reminded of that. So I feel like what we do in that context is even more important and more valuable, and we do get a very diverse group of audience that comes. We got a lot of new Austin people coming that didn't even know we existed before we got back together. I remember with Gentrifuck, somebody told me that there was a couple of guys that walked out of that show at the Spider House when we did it at the Spider House Ballroom, and the dude was like, that was a great show. I think they were talking about me. Yes, we were, motherfucker. But so it's interesting. It's different. I mean, the context is different. I think it was valuable then, but I think it's almost more valuable now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's how I would think. Like back then, it seems like it was born out of an idea, and you happen to have the support of that niche, the committee, the UT audience, who were probably very honed in on, oh, Latino, this is my community, I'm going to go. And as Austin has evolved, it's like, hey, don't forget about us. We're an important part of Austin and American history, and our culture matters.
And Gentrifucked actually comments on that issue. It's from our particular perspective, but it's a universal problem. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I noticed when we came back and did that show, I was annoyed. I was like, why are we doing this fucking show? We haven't done shit in years. Why are we the ones doing this fucking show? What the fuck are y'all all doing? I was personally offended because I'm like, do y'all white people in this community think that shit's not going to affect y'all? And then, of course, over the years, you see this theater closed, this theater's closed, this venue has to move, this one. Mm-hmm. That's the history of America. A bunch of white people thinking shit's not going to affect them until it bites them in the ass. Yeah. Only because it's first hitting other communities.
Right.
And that was a perfect example. On a comedic level, I was offended. I'm like, y'all guys are that comfortable? Y'all don't think this is something worth commenting on or at least doing some work about? Mm-hmm. But the show still applies to everybody. Like that show, we're looking at it from our perspective culturally, but the issue still applies. We went and did that show in San Francisco, and people were telling us that's happening right up the street, and we were in the Mission District. They were like, this woman came up to Michael after one of the shows, was crying because it struck a chord with everything she's been through. She had to move to some boonies out there, and anyway, so. Yeah. It's we've had to deal with that a lot from the very beginning of people thinking that it's less than because if it's brown or it's not relevant somehow or whatever, and then they come and they're stunned. I mean, I have a friend who took a friend of hers who I think had never, and he came to the LCP 25 show, which was all retrospective stuff, and he was like, "How did I not know about this group?" Huh. And he was reacting to stuff that was like done 20 years ago. And he was having that kind of reaction. Like, I need to come to everything these guys do. Yeah. So it's, it's cultural, what do they call it? Not cultural superiority, cultural arrogance. Yeah. Which is what we all have to deal with all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a pause break and we're going to do our little card game. So Adrian, you pick a card, just point to it. The one you want to answer. Okay, so I'll do that. And so what we're going to do is this Where Should We Begin? This is a card game by Esther Perel, and our web guru, Richard Goodwin, gifted me this card game, and I've brought it into the podcast just kind of as a fun little aside before we enter our second half of the episode. So you get to read that, and I have to try to answer it.
Boxers or briefs, and why? I should have gotten that one.
Let's see. I'm a fan of boxers. I think boxers, a little something to the imagination, I guess, as opposed to it's all there.
Right. So. Yeah, that's a good explanation.
All right, let's see. Hopefully yours is a little more highbrow than that one. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. All right, Adrian. Your question is, I wish I would have spoken up when... ...
Wow. God, there's so many... I'm sure there's so many moments. Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like I speak up all the time, though. That's the problem. I don't, maybe not right away, but I give people a lot of rope to hang themselves with.
Yeah.
Because I'm even thinking about, it depends on the context. Like, if it's in relationships or something, I feel like I know for a fact that, there was always times that I should have expressed gratitude more. Like going back, we were talking about, even within the LCP context, I don't think we had to learn to be more grateful for it. And when it comes to people, letting people know they're appreciated, and that's just something I've consciously tried to make a priority in my life. So and that's the result of looking and going, I didn't do that enough, right? Yeah. Or I should have done that more. So that's a manner of speaking up, right?
Yeah.
As far as like social issues or something, I'm a pain in the ass. Like I came up in Waco where I was surrounded by fucking backwards ass people, and I almost got killed a couple times for saying shit. You know,
gosh.
like just saying. Like I worked at one summer. I was back to Waco from UT on summer break, and I worked at a car wash that was owned by a guy who employed my dad, and working with redneck people and stuff. But I remember there was this one woman who worked the cash register, and she saw like this interracial couple, and this one had to be like in 1990, 91, 92, I don't remember, 93, I don't know. But she was like, and so they had a little biracial kid, She goes, "Oh, you hate to see that."
Oh, good.
And I was
Lord.
like, "Why?" "Well, he gonna have all kinds of problems." I said, "Yeah, people like you create problems for him. Otherwise, he'll be fine." And they didn't like me. Like one of the woman's boyfriends who would have killed me showed up and got in my face. And at that point in my life, I'd gotten into fights before. That wasn't a problem. But I'm looking at somebody, I'm like, okay, this guy's got a fucking knife in his pocket, something. I'm just gonna let him say whatever the fuck he's gonna say.
Yeah.
So my point is, in those kind of contexts, I've never had an issue speaking up. That was put to the test a lot back then. In interpersonal things, like I said, I give people a lot of rope to hang themselves with, and then I finally will say something, but only when I have a quote-unquote unimpeachable case.
Yeah.
And my mom would tell me that when I was a kid. She goes, "You should be a lawyer. You'd either win all your cases or get thrown out of court," So I have a lot of patience, but once that patience is over, you're going to hear whatever needs to be heard. Yeah. But yeah, on a personal level, I wish that I had, there were times I look back on that I wish I had been more grateful or more verbally grateful to people. And I've rectified that in the time since then. But you try to learn those lessons as you go. So maybe that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the state of comedy for, I don't like that term, Latinx.
Yeah.
I like the Latino, Latina, Mexican-American, Mexican.
Yeah.
What do you think about the state of comedy?
I don't even know what the state of it is, honestly. I see certain stand-ups pop up.
Yeah.
I don't even know, because you talk to a lot of stand-up comics, and I find it's hard for me to get into any stand-up unless somebody has a really interesting, unique voice, or perspective. And that's the problem. There's so much stand-up that there's, I imagine it was like this in the 80s too, where it's like there's a template.
Yeah.
And most people just follow that template. And then in the 80s, it was the observational comedy, the guy with the attitude, the sarcasm, like David Letterman spawned, everybody's super sarcastic, and I see that a lot now where it's like, I've seen so many comics where it's like attitude. I'm talking about generally, not brown comics, but just generally stand up, where it's like attitude over material.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do see that.
Well, what percentage would you say that is? I mean, because I feel like maybe I'm not seeing a correct representation. Maybe.
Well, I don't go to that many open mics, but the people that are in that 1 to 3 year range, that's what they think comedy is currently.
Right.
And you just, my philosophy is I just have to wait them out until they figure out what their voice actually is and how they start connecting with audiences. Because I mean, there's only so much insulting to the audience that you can.
Those people that rely on crowd work a lot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which isn't material.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get, Instagram likes and TikTok likes and all that good stuff. But you gotta have something backing that up when you.
Well, it's like
people pay.
Well, it's like look at people like Richard Pryor. He actually was on stage because he had to say something. So you see people now where it's like you want to get on stage because you want to be on stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you'll figure out what to say after. So but as far as like the Latinx comics or whatever that I see, I mean, it's interesting. Like Vanessa doesn't brand herself that way at all. Really, it's just a funny woman telling stories. I think that's kind of where it's at. I don't think anybody really wants to do political stand up anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like they feel like that's too dangerous to do. Like literally too dangerous to do at this point.
Yeah. I think I'll say an exception because I've watched so many of his
Yeah,
specials.
you know a lot more.
Is George Lopez.
Oh, well, but that's his brand.
That's his brand.
And he was able to create that brand before now.
Exactly.
I can't see a young stand-up
Yeah.
coming up and trying to do that or even wanting to do that. I can't see that because that's not going to be the examples they're going to see around them, right?
Yeah.
But I will say this: I find it really interesting that I think there's a lot of I don't know. This is just a general impression, but I feel like if you can create a loyal brown audience for yourself, they will show up to anything.
Yeah.
Like the stand-ups that I do see that are breakthrough, I see that, like that they have a certain type of audience. And then you see like stupid shit. Like what's that little beef that was between George Lopez and that other guy?
Ralph Barbosa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of hater shit is that? Like why? It's like, well, dude, you're gonna die eventually, like everybody else. Like, there's other people that are young, born after you, and also, why would you try to squash that?
Yeah.
Why would you try to squash somebody who's obviously well liked and is doing a good job? And that's so retro right there. That whole thinking like there's only room, because that used to be the case for like that was what like Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy had to deal with. It was like, there's only room for one. And Richard Pryor felt that whenever Eddie Murphy came up. It's like, well, here's the new black guy, shove you to the side. But that's not the case now.
Right.
The ecosystem is expanded. So I hate to see that because I think everybody should be supportive of each other, especially good work. Like, And he does have his own voice. He has his own style, his own perspective.
Yeah.
And he does say, the thing that I hate the most about stand-up now for the last like 10 years or so is that whole thing of like, I'm going to say something deliberately controversial, not because I think it or I've thought this through, but just so I can dare you to be offended, and then I'm going to see how I can dig my way out of that controversial thing.
Yeah. It's weird.
Well, what's the point of that?
It's weird.
Because if you got a mic and you're up there saying something, it means something.
Yeah.
Like you're putting that out in the world. So what are you putting out in the world?
Yeah.
Is it thought out? Does it have a point? Is it even eye-opening? Or is it just like, I'm going to play this game of like trying to walk a tightrope? Why don't you walk a tightrope saying some shit that matters and that has a point? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been the most annoying thing to me about like the evolution of stand-up in the last 10, 15 years. And there's a lot of examples you could point to of that, but that seems to be the default for a lot of people coming up. They think that's what their job is.
Yeah.
Which
like I said, it's that 1 to 3 year person that think, I have these role models. Comedy Mothership. Tony Hinchcliffe. I have these role models. They're at, the peaks of their careers. And so if I just replicate that, I'll be good. And I'm like, I just got to wait them out. I don't like talking to under 3 year comics because they haven't figured out their voice.
I want to know who you really like in a minute, but I was going to say like the most interesting to me about that clap back on the backlash on woke or whatever. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? This is nothing new. I grew up with people being bullies to people. Yeah. Like what? You didn't invent shit. You're just being a fucking bully with a mic.
You just put a new label on it.
And but who? I mean, I'm not so up on current stand up. I mean, the last stand up special I saw from somebody new that I went, okay, she knows what she's. Is Ali Wong, that one that she did that blew up.
Yeah.
And every time, it's been a while since I've even tried, but a lot of times whenever I click on like a stand up comic thing, like a special, I can't get past 10 minutes because I'm like waiting to have my brain tickled.
Yeah, yeah.
And it hardly ever happens. Yeah. And it's not because I know so much. I'm just an audience.
Yeah.
All
right.
But who do you think has really been great? I mean, I know that you've dug deep into all of that.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa obviously great. I've enjoyed all of her.
And
specials.
she's a storyteller too. I told her that one conversation we had a few years ago where I said, you can't go wrong. Because I said, look, you're doing what all the greats have done. Like they're their own material. Mm-hmm. They tell stories because nobody can steal a story.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ralph Barbosa, I have seen him live before. He's incredible live. Watched his Netflix special, and I thought, man, I hope the audience really gets into this because if you see what he's doing live, it's such a different experience than because he's so dry.
I was going to say, he doesn't break a sweat at all.
Does not, no, and he's very.
But that tells you how good the lines are.
Yeah, and his economy of word usage is like, dang, that's fine art.
That's what people don't understand. That's what it's all about. And like Rodney Dangerfield, his whole thing was his whole goal was how can I get a setup and a punchline in one sentence. Mm-hmm. You know, and you listen to those old records and you go, he came close a lot of times. He did it a few times, you know. Yeah. But its syllables are your enemy. Yeah. You know, like how many syllables can we get rid of here? Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the Austin comedy scene, one of my favorites is Jason Rodriguez. He came over from California a couple of years ago, and he's great because in my own brain, I compare him to George Lopez, who's been able to appeal to both Brown and the general audience. Jason can play in front of any crowd and do great. I mean,
what's his focus?
Observational, he's a shorter storyteller. He doesn't go into the longer stories and setups that Vanessa or. I guess Ralph is a little bit of a shorter storyteller, but if you have a chance to check out Jason.
Speaking of George, I always recommend this to anybody who doesn't know about it. But like the Team Leader CD, that is a classic comedy CD. Yeah. Like every bit on that is classic. We used to listen to that on the road whenever the LCP would travel. That would be on the CD player. Yeah. I need to go back and re-listen to it because it's a masterpiece. George at his peak was great, and all these young guys. I mean, like I said, I see the following that these younger up and coming performers have, and they, the whole fucking social media thing too. Jeez. Yeah. That's a job in itself.
It is. All right. Well, we have burnt up so much time not talking about the primary focus of having you here, which is Estar Guars.
Yeah. Estar Guars.
That's my attempt at Spanglish. I'm actually not really good at Spanglish. You've got your next show coming up with the LCP. And it is coming up very soon. This is going to go out the last weekend of June, and the shows are the 6th through 7th?
5th through 7th.
5th through 7th, so 3 nights at Scottish Rite.
Scottish Rite Theater. It's 2 evening shows and 2 matinees on Sunday.
Oh, 4 shows.
Yeah, 4 shows, yeah.
Wow.
And the third time we produced it in Austin.
Okay.
It was that concept was always intended to be an annual thing with new shows, but we brought it back. We did it originally in 2019. We brought it back in 2022 after the pandemic kind of thinned out, and we toured with it to Dallas in 2022, and we're doing it one last time. This is the last time we're going to do this.
Oh, really?
This particular show.
This is special.
Yeah, and I have a sequel in mind because I never expected. The show is really unique in that it shouldn't work at all. It really shouldn't. But I had the idea, and I told Nick Walker, my partner in the Latino Comedy Project, our token white guy is what we call him, and he's my brother from another mother. But I told him the idea in 2017, yeah, and he said, so the concept is. Basically, what if George Lucas had been Jorge Lucas? What would Star Wars have looked like? So, just like George Lucas used all of his cultural references and stuffed it into it, like this is that version, right? Of if it had been a Latino online film school dropout who created it. But Nick told me, he goes, yeah, man, you're the only person who could write something like this. You're a politics nerd, you're a comedy nerd, and you're a Star Wars nerd. Because I was the first generation of Star Wars kids. And he's right. And because of that, it's a really very jam-packed show. It's very meta, but it also has a genuine political allegory with some emotional content. It's a parody, obviously. It's a commentary on our history at the same time. And it has so much going on. Has puppetry in it. Yola, nice. Our Yoda is a Mexican abuela named Yola. and she's portrayed with the puppet on stage by the actress. You see the actress.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that's based on my grandmother. That character is based on my grandmother. She actually has some lines that are verbatim from my grandmother, but it's a very surprising show, and the audiences and people came. I mean, even during single runs, people come back. They come back the next weekend and bring other people with them because you can't see a show like this anywhere else.
Yeah.
You can't. Not this kind of production, this kind of mixture of content and tones, and yet still walk away feeling like you got a very emotionally satisfying experience. Because the whole point was that at the end of the show, people walk out feeling joyful, just like with the original Star Wars movie, and it accomplishes that for the audience.
Yeah.
And there's only 4 shows. 3 days, 4 shows, and then that's it. It's only one weekend, so get your tickets before that weekend because there won't be like, I'll go check it out second. There won't be that.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing. I mean, we've gotten incredible reviews. We went to Dallas and did it. People loved it there. We sell so much merch. We sell so many Yola shirts. with her instead of a lightsaber, it's a vela, like the candle holder with this lightsaber coming out of it, So it's jam packed with a bunch of like kind of cultural jokes like that. But it's been amazing. I mean,
How big is the team that is putting?
Well, that's the thing.
together?
It's a different thing from an LCP show. The LCP sketch show is like usually 5-6 people, so we keep it tight and we all play multiple characters. For a show like this, because of the concept, you have to cast right. You have to cast for the part. So you have Princesa. You have I play Theo Juan Kenobi. Who's kind of recovering alcoholic.
Of course.
Yeah, maybe not recovering. And, Yola, you have to find somebody that can play that, and Darth Vendido. So it's a big cast. It's like Han Cholo. Don't forget Han Cholo. Y Chewy. Yeah, we go for all those jokes right off the top. But there's a lot more to the show than that. But yeah, it's about 14, 15 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean... It's unwieldy, and I would like to think that I've gotten a lot better at producing it after doing it a couple times because you're never too old to learn. That show has been a learning curve, like from the start, because I'd never done a show this big until we did this show, and it was made possible initially by Kickstarter.
Huh.
Yeah, because I'm like, we don't have the resources to do, because we can't just go out there like with the sketch show in a black shirt and just put on a hat and a thing on top. Yeah. It's like we need to have costumes. We need to make a puppet. We need to like do digital effects. I mean, we have this one shot where the Empire has like a chancla shaped starship, instead of the Star Destroyer, it's like a space chancla. Uh-huh. And it looks legit. It looks like a shot out of the movie. We had a friend of mine, Eric Sylvester, who did that shot, and multiple others like that. So there were a lot of like things that had to be created for the show, and our fans, after we only been back at it for a couple of years, we had enough of a fan base built back up that they made it possible. They contributed to put the seed money for it, and it's still going. I have big ideas for a sequel. Now that I've been able to actually sit back and like watch the audience inspired a sequel, because being in the wings, feeling and seeing and hearing the audience response to the show over and over again, it's almost like they embedded an idea in me in a way, and I'm like,
magic.
And and I'm like, I could make like a deeper version of this for them, and a sharper version based on what they're giving us, So I have a lot of ideas for, because it's an allegory as well. Like it's talking about what we're going through now,
sure, and
you don't run out of material for that.
No.
And also for the audience, it's this really cool experience. Like, they won't leave after the show, and we tell them the cast will be out here to take pictures with, and they're around for half an hour after every show, taking pictures with the Yola puppet, with the Princesa, with the Resistencia soldiers, which are these women soldiers that look like the Adalitas for the Mexican Revolution. They're kind of costumed like that. So they love lingering and kind of basking in what the cast has created, and they have a real connection to the show. So I'm looking forward to that again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very special.
That's amazing. And of course I'm not a Star Wars nerd, but
You don't have to be.
I have to make the nerdy joke that says make sure your sequel is the right one, not the bad one that everybody always talks about.
Well, that's going to be part of the joke. And well, that's the thing. This show has meta levels. Like there's the show, the story, but then it cuts in between with video stuff about the making of Estar Guars. Like they used to do those old documentaries. So you get interviews with Jorge Lucas talking about his inspiration and saying things like, you know, whatever, in 50 years, who's really going to care? And then he looks at the camera, right at the audience, you know. So that meta level is always there about like how has this concept and this property influenced culture in that we've grown up in and stuff. So, and I'm going to play with that even more in the next show for sure.
Nice. So you've already got a line of sight of a sequel. Are there other projects that you're illuminating with? Yeah,
I'm finally going to do a show that had the idea a few years ago. I'm finally going to be able to make the time to do it, which is a new one-man show. I haven't done a new one-man show in like 20 years. But this one has to be done. And the title is Hispanic Republican Male into the Pendejo-verse. And it's examining something that I've witnessed firsthand in my life, the kind of radicalization of some Latino men, you know, the right-wing radicalization.
Yeah.
And just radicalization in general, like just kind of turning around one day and going, who the fuck is this? What happened? Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like, you're the same person, but something happened to you, you know?
Yeah.
And I realized what I do a lot of times when I have an idea for a show, like even with the Star Wars, I didn't commit immediately to doing that show. I spent a couple of months just bringing up the idea to people, and they light up. You have to do that. You have to do that, you know? And I go, okay, this is my market research. So if we do it and we let people know about it, they will show up.
Yeah.
This idea was the same thing where I would ask people, I go, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a show about this. And they would have one of two responses. They'd go, yeah, what's up with that? Or they'd go, oh, let me tell you about it. So I'm like, so there's a lot of people that will not only relate to it, but there are a lot of people that don't understand what's going on with that, why we've seen that. And I had to figure it out for myself over a few years' time of like, what happened here with this personality? You know, how, like I watched somebody who was basically like a Vulcan emotionally, like become like this very easily angered, triggered guy. You know, like women groups against guns, like that was where are they at? Like they were coming for his guns, you know. Gosh. And like you were the calmest person in our family, you know, up till now, you know, the most cool, level-headed. What the fuck? So I had to make sense out of that, and so it'll be a show about that. How that happens, literally how that happens, like the psychological conditioning that happens when you expose yourself to certain type of messaging over a period of time. And then also what are the immediate personal effects of that on other people around you. And then of course the parody of just the whole right-wing kind of ideology, how ridiculous that is, which is something we've been doing forever. So that's on the calendar. And then probably another LCP retrospective show because we had so much material that we couldn't even touch.
Yeah.
And cast members that were part of other periods of time that are just as great as anybody else. So we're gonna probably do another one of those, and because that was really fun. That was really fun. They were like stage readings, and people were So that's on the immediate horizon over the next year after we do this show.
Very nice. Very nice. I know we spent a lot of time talking about Vanessa and praising, you know, her efforts, but since you've been there from day one, who are some names that people should be paying attention to that have come from or have spent a formative time with the Latino Comedy Project? And it may not be fair to ask you to name, you know, some of your favorite children, but, you know, who should people be paying attention to?
Well, you're right, because really, I mean, and I was reminded of this for the LCP retrospective, just how great everybody is. Like, really, I mean, like I don't want to get into names, but we had members that came back into the mix after, like I said, 20 years of not being involved, and they hit the ground running, and you just saw everybody like come alive, and even they surprised themselves. Yeah. It was like, holy shit.
That's cool.
And the other thing that was interesting about that is because it was like a song that you used to be, like you were in a band and you played a song many times.
You don't forget it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your muscle memory never leaves you. So people just jumped right in. But there's been different periods of like eras of the group and different casts. And I will just say in general that I am super grateful. Like, well, even the people that weren't able to do the LCP 25 thing this last time, I reached out to them when we were doing it and said, look, if we do another one of these, if this works, if this format works, I want to do more, and you're going to definitely be involved. And I got the same response to everybody. Oh, just let me know when. And one member even said, and I honestly didn't know how she would respond. Like, I thought she might be like, no, but she was like, oh, the Latino Comedy Project was such an important experience, and I always cherish it, and it was so great, and I would love to, just let me know. So I appreciate everybody's contribution. And I've been very lucky. To work with these people. Gentrifucked was really cool too, because it was me, Michael Trejo, who was a founding member, Omar, who was a founding member, Nick Walker, who was part of the group at the end of the first year, so practically there from the very beginning, Don Uribe, who was there since 2005, and then Yamina, who was a more recent addition, but is like a veteran, like as far as comedy goes and performing. That was the group that came back and did the reunion show, and that was such a great feeling, because you don't always have this luxury, but like to work with people that we all want to make this as good as it can be, and we're all going to work until it's as good as we think it should be, and nobody's going to question that. Like, okay, this isn't where it needs to be yet. Let's do it. Okay. And in that particular show, as proof of that, and this is a group of people that hadn't worked together a long time, we were ready to do that show a week before we actually did it.
Wow.
Like, it was like, we could do this now. And it was so good. I told Michael, this is kind of like the thing about pointing at the stands at the baseball game. But I said, you know what, Michael? If we do this, if we don't fuck up what we have right now, by the time we do it on stage, this show is going to get a standing ovation. And we did.
Nice.
So I'm lucky to be able to work with people that everybody's pulling in the same direction. Everybody is great at what they do. Everybody's going to make it better than what it is on paper. So like, I just can't say enough. So I would just say, just come to the Latino Comedy Project shows and see how great people are, and to see a great ensemble. And that's another thing, Valerie, that I don't know there aren't any sketch groups.
No.
And I'll tell you why, because it's fucking hard.
It's very hard. It is the hardest thing.
It's hard to do, and it's hard to keep it together.
Yep.
So, if for nothing else, come whenever we do some new shows, come see that, because everybody's going the improv or the stand-up route, because it's a lot easier to do that.
Although there is ATX Sketchfest.
Oh, yeah. Well, but how many sketch groups out of Austin? I'm thinking
many.
about. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few, and there's some newly created ones, but they come and they go, because it's so hard.
See, that's interesting you say that, because when I was doing the research for LCP 25, I was digging back into the time machine and looking at stuff on our old websites, and I was seeing names of troops that I hadn't thought about in 20 years. And I'm like, I wonder, like, I would do internet searches, right? Say, like, this group, it was like they never existed. They never existed. And I had to tell the rest of the group that. I said, there is a sketch group cemetery, you know? And I understand, because it's hard. Yeah. It's hard. We didn't do it for 4 or 5 years. We didn't think we'd ever get back together. And once we did, like I said, I've kept it going, because I see it as a public service, an emotional and spiritual service to people. Because who else would be doing what we're doing in Austin?
Right.
Yeah. Which is why you need to buy a ticket to Estar Guars,
yes,
July 5th through 7th.
Yes, you do. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want people to know about you or the Latino Comedy Project?
Well, that I'm grateful that we've been able to have an audience over all this time, a loyal audience.
Yeah, 25 years.
To grow the audience too, because there's still people that are discovering us. And I'm grateful that I can do this. But as far as you can look us up and go to our social media and see what we're up to, and I promise, if you come to Estar Guars, you will have a good time, and you will walk out happy.
Yeah.
And also that cast. I mean, I shouldn't neglect to mention what an incredible cast is in that show this time, because the cast changes a little bit each time, depending on like people's commitments and stuff. But it's a killer's row of people, and they're all doing. I mean, some of them are doing the show for the first time, and they're killing it. So. And it's a hard show. It's a hard show to do because you're doing slapstick 1 minute and then you're doing like some emotional, traumatic scene the next minute, and it's amazing to me the audience goes with it every time. But yeah, that's the last thing I would say is that come check that show out, and then keep an eye out for everything we do later in the year and next year.
Okay, very nice.
And thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, you ready for your closing question?
Oh, is there a closing question?
Yes, there is.
Okay, sure.
One word to describe your future.
Bright.
Nice. Not boring.
So bright, I got to wear shades. Yeah.
That's a 90s reference for you.
Well, what? Yeah, we're old. We're fucking old. What have been some of the funnier or the more depressing responses?
One of my favorites from the great Duncan Carson is ugh.
That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, some very bright ones. It was a recent one. They said money.
That's not bad either.
That's very committed and focused. All right. Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham presents Adrian Villegas. Adrian, tell us where we can find you on social media and promote your projects one more time.
You can just look up Latino Comedy Project. Our Instagram will show up. Our website will show up. Instagram is probably the best place to follow us, and that's just Latino Comedy Project at Latino Comedy Project, and that will also have links to any shows that we have going on. It'll have links to other our link tree, and all that stuff. So you can find us very easily that way.
Okay. Very good. We hope you've enjoyed learning about how Adrian got to be the comedic genius that you heard today just as much as I have. This has been Comedy Wham presents Adrian Villegas. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you so much.